welcome to our second webinar as part of our Unruly Passenger series. My name's John Franklin and I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at EASA. Hopefully many of you joined us before for the session last week on Monday, and perhaps also our Safety Week. In terms of this session today, we'd love to get your questions and your interactions throughout the session. So if you, maybe the first thing is just, it's always good to do a quick sound check. So if anybody has it, if somebody in our audience can just drop us a message in the chat that the sound can be heard all right. Occasionally that's a problem. If you have any technical problems, my first piece of advice would be to go to a Chrome browser and maybe try again. We find that sometimes fixes problems. Failing that, drop me a message in the chat and hopefully we'll make it all work and we can help you however we can. In terms of questions and interaction, what you should be able to do is in the bottom right hand side of the screen of the WebEx window, you should be able to see apps and Slido, and then you can both ask questions in the Q&A part or upvote other people's questions, and then should all be really easy and hopefully will work. So just let me know if you have any questions throughout the session. We've got some great panelists and some great discussions hopefully we're going to have on the session today. So I'm going to start by just introducing our panelists, or asking them to introduce themselves, where they work, what they do, and particularly their relation to this topic. So Claire, maybe I start with you.
Sorry, Claire, just a quick question. Claudia is on my side, so he's asking, he needs some sign when he can start the demonstration from the Brussels.
Okay, I'll
probably
send him a message. That's probably the best thing.
Okay, so.
Okay, we're gonna have a live demonstration a bit later on. We're trying something really clever here, so we'll. But hopefully this logistics will work out. Sorry about that. Cool. Oh, Claire's computer seems to have done. Claire was having some computer problems. So it looks like, Claire, are you still there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Ah, yes, excellent. Yep. Cool. I got a little pop-up that said Claire has left the call, but you're still here. Can you you could start by introducing yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody. My name's Claire Harrell. I am the peer support lead at Odilia Clark. My history is 23 years, cabin crew, cabin manager, human factors trainer, and on the human factors team. And the reason that I am here today is I have, obviously, in my 23 years, I had a number of disruptive passenger incidents, but also I really am interested in the value that we can give by supporting people and making sure that people are in the right place to be able to manage these incidents and to help them recover if they do have traumatic events on board. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks, Claire. I think it's been really exciting in the discussions we've had around this topic is this issue of how we support the staff who find themselves in these situations. Is, I wouldn't say it's a forgotten thing, but we put so much focus on the passenger behaviour that sometimes it's easy to forget that element of how we support the staff through that process. So it's great you could join. Daniela, it looks like you made it. Can you introduce yourself? Hopefully you can hear us and unmute and introduce yourself.
Yes, I can hear you. I hope you hear me well. Okay,
it's like the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yes, it's been really hard, but I got it. Okay, but it's normal. Well, I'm here as a ETF Ground Staff Committee Chair. ETF is the Federation of Unions, European Unions. But I also work at Bologna Airport in Italy. I've been working for 35 years, and for maybe 30 years, I've been the regional secretary for an Italian union, Field GDL. So I could say that as I work in frontline and on the ground, I experience, me and my colleagues, a lot of these issues, and we want to stand by our staff and try to solve it. Thanks.
Fantastic, thanks, and good that you could join us. And next, Eva, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm here because I'm responsible for the training manual process, proficiency checks, safety and human factors training in Riga Airport. So I'm not so experienced like Claire and Daniel. My experience is only 20 years in aviation, but I started with the airlines and afterwards continue with the training process in airlines. And 5 years ago, I started to do that in Riga Airport. So that is the reason why.
Fantastic, and great that you could join us. And Eva has been supporting this work for the building of the campaign, also as part of the wider airport community through ACI Europe as well. It's perhaps also worth kind of mentioning that as well, just to help people. Fantastic. And then finally, we've got Hans Christian. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thanks for having me, first of all. My name is Hans Christian Gassmann, and I'm the chief cabin crew with Norwegian Airlines. I'm heading into my 20th year now, so as you see, I'm wearing my uniform, so I'm still flying as part of my duty and responsibility. And I personally have a few incidents on board, but also working on with the procedures that we do establish towards the unruly behaviors, but also follow up. So I have a highly interest in the topic itself. So,
and I can imagine in your role, it's something that, like you say, you're dealing with continually throughout the day, and a continual challenge. And certainly we talked about a little bit on the first session that most organisations have seen an increase in events, an increase in severity. So it'll be interesting as we go through just to kind of find out more about the challenges you've been seeing, and particularly how we solve them, both as individual organisations and different sharing of practices, and also then in a wider collaborative sense. So I'm just going to quickly give you an initial introduction from our side in terms of what we've been doing in the campaign. Hopefully, some of you maybe joined the session that we had earlier in the week, but some of you perhaps didn't. So from our side, from an EASA perspective, it's a topic we've been working on for a number of years now. Some of you might remember our Not On My Flight campaign that we did back in 2019. And kind of one of the big lessons that we saw from that is that it's all very nice for us as regulators to talk about, to try and promote the topic. But in reality, anybody who's likely to be an unruly passenger probably hasn't remotely got any idea who EASA is, let alone to see a video from EASA or another regulator on an authority website. So this is where, particularly as we evolved, certainly during COVID and the last 2-3 years, we focus much more on building a truly collaborative campaign with people from industry and all sorts of different people across the community that organisations can use themselves with their own passengers, and creating clear and common messages around the whole topic of unruly passengers. So this is what we're kind of trying to do, and we had for both last year with the campaign Ready to Fly, and then this year's campaign, we've had a number of airlines and airports and national authorities and ground handling organisations involved in building the material and all of the different things, and particularly, as Daniela, Claire and Eva have all been part of that work as part of the wider task team. And it's great that through the involvement of David at the National Authority in Norway, Hans Christian will be able to come and give us a view from the Norwegian side. So just to give you a few points about our campaign itself. So this week is kind of Unruly Passenger Week from our side. So we had this first webinar on Monday, more focusing on understanding the problem, and then today we're more focused on kind of going over some of the challenges, but really starting to look at some of the solutions now at a collaborative and organisational level. And then on Friday we kind of have the public launch where we're really promoting this to the wider general public. We shared lots of material. We've got lots of organisations, as you might see in the bottom corner here. This is one of the social media posts then with the Norwegian authority are going to be promoting with different organisations in Norway. But we've had lots of organisations asked to add their logos to the material. So if needs be, if you go to the EASA Air Ops community, and there's a Fly Right campaign page that has all of the material and all of the assets around the campaign that you can download and use for yourself. So we have a campaign brief that gives the short, key, kind of simple information. Then we have a management kind of brief document that if you're in an organization where you need to persuade your management why doing something or doing work on unruly passengers is important, that's there intended to help you do that. Then what we've also created then is an airline safety article. So if you have a safety magazine, as in an internal one with your staff, whether it's airlines, airports, etc., we have this safety article that you can use wherever you like. It's a Word document. You can download from that site and put it in any magazine, share it as an email, whatever you want in your organization. We've also created then some social media images around the whole campaign, and that's all available. And as I say, you can send your logos to us to the email address there, or reach out to me through LinkedIn, and we can add logos to anything you like, and then send it back to you to use yourselves. Similarly, we have some posters as an example here on the bottom left for TV screens, toilet doors, those kinds of, and we have them in portrait and landscape. So we have all of this, and we also have lots of just standard texts with common messages. If you need text for a website, whether you're an airport or an airline or a handling agent or anybody, and you need some material, some words that you can use around this topic, we have all of that, whether it's communicating with staff or communicating with passengers. There's lots of different options there of material that you can use within your organization. So we have all of that stuff available. And then what we also then have is these kind of key messages around the campaign, and these are kind of what the focus for our discussion is going to be now, is particularly around, just going over again some of the challenges that people see in their organizations, and how we can collaborate and communicate, and this idea of uniting for success. How you can, as organizations, empower your staff by equipping them with the skills and the training they need to handle difficult situations in the first place. And then when something difficult happens, when there is a situation, how do you support your staff? How do you provide them with, if they might need any counselling or support, or just support? We heard Ryanair and EasyJet talking about the support they give, that if something goes to court, for example, that they can then, they're there as an organisation, so that it's the organisation involved in any legal action and not specifically the individual. And then particularly, how can we help prepare our passengers and kind of support them through this process? So that's the kind of key things from our side. And maybe, Hans Christian, I'd come to you first. I know you've got a couple of slides with kind of what the situation looks like from your side, and how you handle
that. Yes, thank you, John. First of all, I would just like to mention that our company has gone through a rather big change. Pre-pandemic, we had 160 aircraft, 40 of them 787 operations. We flew the long haul as well. But then after the pandemic, we have gone through reconstruction, and we are now operating a fleet of 80 aircraft on the short haul network. That being said, the topic of unruly passengers are still challenging, regardless of what kind of operation you do fly. But of course, it's a little bit, what shall I say, easier to deal with on the short haul operation, as the potential diversion might then be shorter instead of flying over the Atlantic. So I'll show you some numbers later, so you can go to the next slide, John. So first of all, I think it's important to emphasize that the policy, or our view towards unruly behavior, it's not acceptable. We have a zero tolerance towards unruly behavior, and I think this is rather well supported then by the civil aviation authorities in Norway, and the initiative that we now have ongoing in the background, and as David referred to at Monday, where we now are joining forces, both the civil aviation authorities, airline operators, airports, handlers and such, that we stand united towards the challenges that we are facing, unfortunately. As an airline, we do have various manuals that we do follow, and our policies, it's clearly stated in the operation manuals part A. Also towards our customers, it's actually quite clearly stated. If you look at the terms and conditions, they actually all do tick off before they do travel abroad. I had a quick look at it before I joined the meeting, and it's unfortunately, I think, rather too many passengers that are traveling, they are not aware of the terms and conditions they're actually taking off for. Because the text it's rather crystal clear when it comes to what kind of behavior that is accepted or not on board an aircraft. When it comes to the company as a whole, there are many different stakeholders that are involved in the unruly passenger behavior. Luckily, one of the improvements we have seen as a company, as we have decreased in size, is that collaboration between all the departments we're having has become much better and tighter. We have the flight operations department, we have the in-flight department, which is more the commercial side of it, which is also then an important part, but can of course then lead to situations on board as we do sell alcohol. We also do have the safety office, training department that we talked about on Monday, security department, and last but not least, the safety department. And I think it's of utmost important that we as a company, we are depending on proper collaboration and ongoing dialogue to then make sure that we are addressing the topic, but also adjusting potential procedures, training, and everything that we are given to the crew. With regards to if something happens, I just wanted to mention that in our company we do have an alert system, a warning system, because if we do have incidents happening, we have the duty manager at work that will then send out messages to a certain group, and we are then able actually then to do a follow-up of the crew concerned, regardless of being in our base in Barcelona, Oslo, or Arlanda. So we do actually have then local base management that potentially can meet them at gate or then call or whatever deemed action necessary after the incident have happened. I thought a little bit about the alert system and actually the actual follow-up, and I think some of the learning points we have been doing lately, and this is not only related to unruly passengers, but incidents overall. We see that the initial follow-up, it's important, but it's equally important to do the later follow-up as well, because I think as crew out flying there, we do deal with the incidents differently. So I think that's probably one of the most important takeouts from that. And then last but not least, as we have discussed several times, communication is key. I would say both internally and externally towards our customers. What are the expectations and what are the procedures that we have defined that can help us to mitigate such situations? I see there's a question now. I can answer that directly. What is an alert system? That's basically a system that we have internally that tells us when something happens. So let's say we have a flight Oslo to Malaga and we have a situation on board. We are then able to communicate that from the aircraft to the ground and then further to the potential management that will follow up the case on the ground. Yes, John, you can do the next slide as well.
There we go.
So it's a little bit a small text, but I'll run you through it. So I sat down together with our safety office and we had a look at some of the statistics, which I think more or less basically support what has been communicated, that we have also with Norwegian, we have seen an increase in number of unruly passengers events. And in our case, if you look at the top, it's numbers from 2018 to 2019 and 2022 to 23 below. What we also have done is that we have added more event descriptors. On the top, you will only see offload, denied boarding, and alcohol intoxication as the one to the left and one to the right. But below, we have also added police, airport security, and disobeying crew. So on our part, we have done more SPIs so we can actually measure and see more specifically when and where the unruly incident actually happened. So it's just basically then to show you that we have seen an increase and we have seen more the event descriptors being added because there are so many different phases of it. And also on our part, what we have done, we have a cabin safety action group meeting every month, and unruly passengers is actually one of our safety objectives for 2023. So we're actually on a rolling monthly basis. We're actually digging into the numbers together then with all stakeholders.
And I think that for me that raises some really interesting points. In terms of for other organisations is, as you say, the importance of having descriptors that you can actually use. I know, we have the same problem with the taxonomy we use here in EASA and with national authorities, is that we were capturing lots of, yes, we've got lots of unruly passengers, but have you found it? I'm assuming you found it much more useful to understand more with the extra descriptors that you brought in. And I think, I know there was a couple of comments about not seeing the numbers and not seeing the labels, but I think it's more the relevance of showing the importance of having relevant descriptors and having more data points to be able to know what to do about it as an organization.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, just to on the left, you will, the most reported incidents we have is actually passenger sickness. So that's the one to the left. And then you see carry-on baggage, and then you see offload denied passengers. And that's from 2018 to 2019. And then below, it really indicates that the number of cases are going up. And then, as I said, it gives us so much more valuable data when we see in which phase of the flight or on ground where the occurrence actually have happened. And then it's easier to also then target the specific training.
And have you seen that you've evolved the training that you provided to particularly your crews as you've seen, kind of learned more about the challenge from the data you have in your SMS? So
the training itself, of course, it follows the approved training pattern as in our manual, and of course, according to the approvals from the CAA. I think it has been rather consistent throughout the years, but I now think that we are able to, or we should adjust the training more as we see more challenges related to the different phases of the flight. Training is also one of the important stakeholders in that respect. And also when we had the meeting with the civil aviation authorities, we also did discuss with the other operators in Norway. And of course, we do see, even if the foundation is the same, we still have some kind of other training performed by the other operators. Of course, depending on the size of the company. Also, one of the good things that came out of COVID in our case is that we have established a very good collaboration with the other operators in the interest of safety.
And have you I guess, as well as operators, you do a lot of collaboration, particularly, I guess, where your main bases are and other airports as well?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we are based in Oslo. Of course, we have 10 bases, but we also, I mean, we have 2 AOCs in our case, one in Norway and one in Sweden. But they also have an excellent collaboration between the civil aviation authorities. And actually, before the pandemic, we met up in Bodø, where their main quarter is, and we actually already back in 2019 addressed the topic of unruly passengers. So, I mean, the topic itself has always been important, but I think it has been rather more visible lately. And of course, especially during the pandemic, where we had the challenges with the face mask and everything else that came with it.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing your insights there, and we'll come back with some other points during the discussion in a minute. What I thought we do at this point is we talked about training and how we can support staff be ready to deal with these kind of situations, and we'll talk a little bit more with some experiences from Eva in a second. But we're going to try this. It's the first time we did it, so I will apologise in advance if it doesn't work. But Claudio, if we come to you, and hopefully we can run the live demo. So we've got a demo set up for you. There happens to be an event, the TC Alliance, who support us with our Conversation Aviation magazine, have an event where they actually have some demos running with actual people in Brussels at an event. So we're going to try and show this on the screen. So Claudio, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear us okay?
We can.
Perfect.
I can hear you and we can see what's happening there. So whenever you're ready.
Vincent is just going to introduce them quickly. Yeah, come on.
Hi, I'm Vincent Incamici, I'm the CEO of the IFOA. As a former Krav Maga instructor, I'm very pleased to introduce Force Air Defense. The people train cabin crew and ground staff against the unruly passenger. And now you will just enjoy a live performance. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
It seemed to work. We had a couple of people had problems with distortion, but our test stream, we got the idea, and Thank you very much. I think it was what we had some of the discussion yesterday on Monday. Obviously, as organisations, we know different organisations make different choices about what they train their staff with, but yeah, hopefully it just gives you some idea of some of the things that we know some organisations are already doing within their organisations. Is there anything from your side, Claudio, and the team there in Brussels?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that the team here at Force Air Defence have done months of research and have actually trained over 20 fully trained martial arts instructors to train this for cabin crew, ground staff and security staff. Went through lots of different techniques from different disciplines to make sure that they're not hurting the unruly passenger as well, that they're making sure that whatever they're doing is doing it in effect to make sure the unruly passenger is also safe, not hurting anybody, not hurting themselves, and in a safe environment. A lot of research, a lot of discipline has gone into it, and thank you very much for the demonstration.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. That was excellent. Great. Okay, well, thanks for that. Hopefully you all, as an audience, you found that as an interesting interlude in our discussion. And perhaps now's a good opportunity, perhaps, if I move on to you, Eva, and I'll put your presentation up in a second, just so you can talk a little bit more about some of the things you've been doing. I know training's your big area there in Riga, in order to kind of, you know, support your staff in being ready for unruly passengers. So over to you.
So as colleagues already said, especially Hans Christian, this collaboration is very important. And what we did, so first of all, thank you for this campaign, because this push us like start this cooperation on a regular basis, because of course when you have some kind of problems or some kind of issues, you are calling for the colleagues and asking for some solutions or advices or something like that. But starting from 2022, we decided to meet on regular basis as minimum once per year. So we got one meeting 22, and the second one was just 1 month ago. So what we did in these, I would like to say 365 days, we developed how we are listening to our employees, because actually you can show the next one slide. What is very important to give right information to our employees, because otherwise probably they cannot catch why the problem starts with me, and they are starting to blame themselves, because probably they are thinking that they developed this situation, this conflict, and so on and so on. But actually, maybe the conflict starts already before departure, because what doing the passengers, they are buying the ticket and thinking, I buy the ticket in an aerodrome, or they are flying with some kind of airlines, and they are thinking that's not airlines, that's the like aerodrome problems and everything else. So they are mixing everything together, even taxi drivers and all other problems they can meet in this path of their experience. So what we did last year with the colleagues from the airlines, from the police, from the security department and the other sites, we just make a pass for the passenger and try to catch what kind of experience in each step they can meet. And afterwards, we add this information in our training process. Is it helpfully or no for employee? I think that it is, because first of all, we developed the reporting system as well. Not developed maybe, but provide more information how to do that, why we have to do that, more information for the employees for this need. And probably, I hope that they can feel that we listen these problems and we are working with these questions. And actually, we can go already for the next slide as well. Then we can see the information, which is maybe a little bit copy-paste what we saw in this video from the Claudio demonstration. So we developed the training material together with our local airlines. just to explain that employees in the front line, they are not alone, because which is very important, that management is standing back, and the same about the training process. So if the trainers listening the problems, then we can try to find out what kind of methods we can use, and everything else, just to explain all the process for all participants, because the front line, that doesn't mean that that's only airlines. That's actually security staff, that's the check-in staff, that's the ground handling staff as well. So that's in a few words from my side.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Eva. And I think it's it gives a good idea of the different types of training, and as we talked about a lot in the session on Monday, that in terms of practical activities, there's kind of two sides. There's the kind of the major focus is, we want to de-escalate and prevent bad situations occurring, and particularly then getting through to the aircraft, and particularly to the types of situations then where airline staff like Hans Christian's staff and crew on the aircraft have to deal with it. But then if something does happen, how does what happens next? Particularly, we talked also on Monday about collaboration with the police. Do you have similar activities in Riga, where you collaboration with the local police services as well, so you have their support when there's an event?
Yeah, because for this local safety for you, we are calling local safety for you group. So we included the police department as well. So we discussed how to better provide information for themselves as well, and communication channels. So which one is better? How we can get any help much more faster, and everything else. So that's very good experience, and we are sharing this information with the ground handling companies in Riga Airport, because they are involved in this local safety group as well. CAA as well in this year, they because when we start the discussion, what can we do? Of course, we as aerodrome, and the same probably with the airlines, we don't want to push the passenger with a lot of rules, because actually in aviation we already have a lot of rules. What we are doing, we are explaining how you can experience the bad one experience if you are not following these rules. But what did the CA? They said that they will provide extra one campaign to talk about responsibilities from the passenger's side. So that's very important, that we are making this collaboration between all the involved parts. So not only on training questions.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's fantastic, thanks. And maybe Daniela, if I could come to you next from your side. I know you've had some serious, some real exposure to the challenge of unruly passengers. I know, some of the discussions we've had with you both at your airport, and then also your work with your members through ETF. Is it something? How do you see it from the staff side in terms of the things that organisations can do to help prepare their staff and help them to deal with these situations?
Yes, thanks. So we have been working on this issue a lot. Let's say that ETF has been working on it for a long time, but as also my colleagues were saying before, after COVID, just before COVID and after COVID, we had significant augmentation of the issue. So what I think and what we think is that the first important thing is to have tripartite agreements to cope with this issue. And it's really good that aerodromes are talking to airlines and talking to ground handlers. We must not forget the workers, representatives, because as we did in Bologna Airport, we started to collect data. We were saying before that we lack data, and it's good that we're now starting to have them. But we did this through the workers directly. We used a template that was similar to the ones that some airlines have for unruly passengers, and trying to see what was the real issue. Then we had, as you said, a couple of really bad issues on the ground, people being punched and going to hospital just because baggage payment or a delay. and we used our ways as a workers' representative to get the attention, so through demonstrations, also strikes, but we had at the end what we needed. So the idea that police, but also institutions and airport and ground handlers and airlines know it already, they all are trying to solve the problem. Now, I think that this way should be used everywhere, but mostly we need to focus on the training of people, I would say, on the ground, because as you also said in all the leaflets that we are presenting as the EASA campaign, there's a very good one called Handling Unruly Passengers Checklist, because while airline workers are used to have, as we saw also in the example, they could have problems with people, really bad problems on air, and they have to be trained to block these people and to de-escalate. On the ground, it's not really clear what is an unruly passenger. It starts with a psychological threat, then it can go to a physical threat, but sometimes it's just an unsatisfied passenger that wants to film you because you're not letting him board the aircraft because of overbooking or because of whatever is happening. So yes, this is the slide. I think it's really good. And from this webinar, one of the messages I would like to give is that the first thing we all have to know is sit down, try to understand what is happening through the data that we can collect also just in 1 month. We don't need that much. Through the airport, the thing we did, the agreement we did at Bologna Airport has been taken in ETF in a compendium that we presented last year to all social partners, together with other good examples of best practices, but all the other ones were not also with workers' representatives. So what I push for this, because I think, as you said in the beginning, cooperation, collaboration is fundamental for us all to solve the issue. And then try to just say something, a last thing. We know that many people left the industry after COVID. We have many new people coming in. They have no idea of what this is. They are maybe young people going to a gate and performing what they have to perform. And when they find someone screaming at them, they really don't know what to do. They should be helped. This is one of the... So I think we're doing a really good job, and the need for data is fundamental. So EASA is really doing a good job in pushing on this, because, for instance, after the agreement we had in Bologna Airport, now we have an alert system that everybody can call, a very short number from whatever position to cause a 24 hours alert system. Someone will come, and then it will be registered. So we know that from the airport data, they gave us this number from April 2022 to December 2022. They had 85 calls in an airport that moves 8 or 9 million passengers. 85 are the ones that came through. Most of them were not physical, but they were people running down the gate, or people breaking tens of tons or the plexiglass. So not really at the end hurting, but attempting to do it. So we had many of these cases, and this must stop.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And maybe, Claire, this is a good time to come on to you now, and particularly maybe start talking about some of the things you've done in terms of solutions to help the challenge of how staff can deal with unruly passengers, and then perhaps also you could share some experience also about the support available and the support organisations can put in place afterwards, and some of the needs that staff have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. I think it's really, I come at this slightly from a less direct angle, I suppose, being an external company that supports staff. But I think there's two really important points, I think, from my point of view, with regard to supporting and proactively supporting guys, I think is really important. So, you know, before all this happens, all this physical threat, you know, are the staff, are the crews in the right places to be able to manage these things to the best of their ability? It's not always going to happen. You know, you will get physical threats from time to time, but are there incidents that are coming through because, you know, staff may be under stress, or they may have things that are happening for them, and they are less able to manage these situations and de-escalate the situations than they would normally be. So is there training in place to allow them to be in that better place to be able to handle some of those situations? And maybe we can then, you know, I don't want to put there's no blame on the crews at all here. I want to make that very, very clear. This is not about saying the crews can stop this from happening, because quite often they cannot. However, if you put them in a psychological place where they are feeling a little bit more empowered, a little bit more able to manage the discussions and the way that that escalates, then maybe they can stop some of those incidents from escalating to the point of violence. So that's the first point I want to make, really. The second one is when and if it does escalate into violence or into a traumatic situation. That doesn't always entail violence. A situation where somebody feels that they are out of control or they are being abused, then how are they then supported by the organisations? And for me, that's a really important part of my role. So with peer support, support structures, mental health professionals, all of those things that can then help somebody build the skills to manage and recognise what they can do in these situations, but also if a situation escalates, that they can then get the support that they need to recover quickly, to come into a place where they feel that there is no blame, there is no shame, that it wasn't their fault, that they, you know, can be in a helpful and supported place by the organisations. So like I say, a less direct route, but if it's all about managing the well-being, the empowerment, the resilience of those crews, just so that they can manage it as best that they can.
Yeah, maybe it's a good time. Maybe if I came back to you, Hans Christian, can you describe a little bit more about what you do, in terms of post-event support for your teams, if anything happens?
Yeah, so first of all, as I said, we have the initial alert, and I think historically it's very easy then to deal with it when it happens. But I think, as it has been pointed out, the actual follow-up afterwards, it's probably equally important or even more important as we do deal with situations individually. In our case, we have local management in every base that are able to support. We also have safety and health representatives. We have the union, and we also have health insurance that could also then be utilized with more specialists in that respect. Because, I mean, the colleagues working for Norwegian, of course, we do have dedicated people with a certain amount of insight experience as such, but it might also be that we would have to go externally to have further follow-up made. But our HSE colleagues and the health and safety representatives, they will also play an important part in that respect, together basically with all the stakeholders. And we do have had a few incidents, unfortunately, throughout the year. With now my 20 years here, I've not been in a critical incident myself, but we have had people, that have more or less have had their ear torn off. Okay. And of course, that can be seen as extremely challenging situation to be in, and also the consequences that will have in the aftermath of it. So I think then as a company we need to make sure that each individual employee they feel that they are being properly supported and by the company. So because I mean, in all cases where we do follow up based upon the notification, I think it's also important, from a company point of view, that because quite often when you do contact people, which I've done several times myself, the initial feedback from them will often be, I'm doing fine. And quite often they do say that because that's their initial reaction, and they haven't really been able to fully, absorb the incident they have been standing in. So, and that goes really then back to, following up, whether or not being 2 days after, 4 days after, but you would still need them to do that proper follow-up to actually make sure that that the colleague, we are actually doing well. So, and I think also, the topic of well-being and mental health has been mentioned several times, and I think that's more important than ever after the last 3 years that we have been through. It's not just with aviation, but we have seen a dramatic numbers with people struggling because of what we have been through. So, and that is also something you can bring with you at work, even if, of course, you should always be fit to fly or fit to operate, being at the airport as a handler or a cabin crew. But, life happens, and that will impact us either way.
Fantastic. Thanks for that insight there. And there's a couple of questions that perhaps I could come to you with. So you were talking about a little bit earlier and just recent there about when you get the initial information for the crew, and there's a question from somebody: do you have a specific template for crew reporting on unruly passenger occurrences, or do you just maybe have, these are some of the things we would like you to tell us, or do you leave that fairly open for people just to talk about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we have a reporting system as a part of the SMS. So we have a specific provider, I think one of the most important thing as well with the reporting system is that it's user friendly and easy for the people to actually report in. That being said, we also have a great safety office that are handling the reports, and they will also, based upon the input, if not done correctly, they will still be able to adjust it. So, if more information are required from our side, we will always make a follow-up towards the reporter, so we don't have the sufficient information.
Excellent, thanks for that. And maybe I could come to you, Eva, about reporting on your side. Do you have specific forms and processes to encourage people to report, for staff to report and to support them through that process?
Actually, Hans Christian touched very good topic, because of course each company, even Riga Airport as well, we have our own reporting system, which is included in SMS system. But where is the problem? We have only our data, so that means we have no any data from the airline side, and that's the big issue. What we understand already last year, and we start discussion how to develop like common reporting system, because which data are we are keeping together, these are reported to CAA. So that means very dangerous situations. And if we are checking statistics from this side, then we can see that situation maybe is not so bad, because we have just 12 or 15 reports, but they are very dangerous for the employee, because this is already the traumas for employee, the real ones, the broken legs, broken arms, broken teeth and everything else. But statistics on a daily basis for the airline side and from the aerodrome side, every month I think we have more than 100 cases when we are working with unruly passengers which are intoxicated, aggressive, making photos, making videos, and so on and so on. So that's it.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to underestimate the toll of these situations put on individual staff members. So certainly from a personal perspective, I have an elderly mother who lives in the UK, and I fly fairly regularly to the UK from here in Cologne. And there's a particular crew member over the last 2-3 years through COVID, who I've got to know and seen on a lot of flights. There's only one route and it's the same airline. So I've seen this lady on many, many flights. And the amount of the amount of challenging situations she's told me about, particularly as we've gone through the mask kind of challenges, was frightening. But then, last summer when I flew with her on the crew, just you could just see that this had just built up. To have this happen, she was saying, they get unruly passengers every other flight, people screaming and all these terrible things, and you could see at a personal level the toll that put on her. And maybe Daniela, if I come to you in terms of this kind of whole reporting thing, what do you? Any particular tips or advice you give from either your experience at Bologna or also through the ETF in terms of reporting?
Well, as I would say that one of the issues in reporting is that if you have people on not working for years in a place, and they maybe have to be confirmed, many would not report, not even something like that, because if, as someone said, you also fear that it's your fault. So we have to work on reporting a lot. And also, as Yves said, we need to do it throughout the industry, not only because each has its data. And I know there's a big GDPR issue, so we cannot just say we share the data. We cannot do that. But we could find a way without using maybe names or without using particular data that it identifies the passenger. We can do something that gives us a statistic on each airline. It's just an idea that coming to me. We all know, you were saying it before, that when someone comes in, I will say it, well, how I like to say it, when you get in an airport, you normally leave your brain out. I think it's something that is because you have to fly on a tube, something, that is there on the air. So everybody gets less conscious of what they have to do. And then for sure, there are queues, there are things, you buy a ticket and not everything is included. There are many things that we can work on. But if we collect what is happening at security, at some airlines, at some desks that are different, because this is, we know that after liberalization, it is a really fragmented system. It's really complex. It's an airport is super complex, and then when it comes to airlines, it's super complex too. It's a thing that I experienced personally. I had a passenger, punching a guy because he didn't want to stand in the line. We did call police, but then in some countries, if you don't file, I don't know the name in English, but if you don't say that you want to sign out that it's you saying that this guy hurt you, then they cannot stop him. So they did not stop the guy. You have, for instance, a month to say it, but the guy flew away with another airline, which let everybody upset. And they were dealing with the station manager saying, the station manager of a ground handler, saying, why did you leave the passenger leave with another company? It's not something that a station manager alone can prevent, but it is something that if we work on it, we can probably do in the future. One of my ideas is always, as you do it with stadiums, we should be able to ban unruly passengers for a period from airports and airlines altogether, a month, whatever it is, but there should be something that shows that if you behave in that way, you will really be fined. I don't know how we can do that, but this is something that as ETF, we are pushing it everywhere, wherever we talk. We had just this month another project called Viral, which was a variety of industrial relations in civil aviation lockdown, in which we studied many of these issues, not only the unruly passengers, but also whatever happened with in the industry with trade unions, without. We had to cope with many things we were not used to because in this sector was growing and growing, and it came to a great stop. So we went through all these analyses, and we found out that everywhere we have the same problem. So I think we must put our effort together collecting data in the way we can, at least.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Daniel. I think it's it highlights some of the important challenges that we face as an industry in all the different parts of this problem. We talked a little bit on Monday, perhaps for the benefit of people who weren't in that session as well, about the legal situation, and particularly around there's a big push, certainly from the EASA perspective, with the national authorities to implement something called ICAO Montreal Protocol 14, which makes it much easier for people to be prosecuted when they land on an aircraft from a different country than so if you land, let's take Germany, if I have an aircraft in Cologne and an aircraft coming into Cologne lands with an unruly passenger, if that's a German operator, then it's easier for the German authorities to do something with. But if that's from an operator from any other country, that becomes very challenging. And then added to that, as you say, we were talking also with the Irish authority about some of the challenges of, particularly how can you share information with the GDPR challenges. And certainly one of the particular kind of solutions is, and we talked about this on Monday, is organisations getting better as while you can't share information so easily between organisations, is that particularly once a situation is in the public domain, is there was in fact EasyJet and Ryanair were saying on Monday that they have teams now looking at if there are cases in the public domain with other organisations, then once that information's public, then they could take action to ban them from flying from their airline. Daniela, you raised your hand again on that one.
Now, just a second, because you said something very important. What I think we are not talking about the well-being of all passengers, whereas I know that all people on this panel are thinking of that. And this is another problem we have, because we are focusing on unruly passengers against our staff. But then if I am flying as a normal passenger and I have an unruly passenger on board, it will be really bad for me. I wouldn't want to take that flight. And it happens on the ground that if someone is screaming in the queue, other passengers will come to you and say, is that passenger coming on my flight? So this is why it's something that we need to address all together. Thanks, sorry for this.
No, I think it's a great intervention, and maybe a good opportunity to come to Claire finally at this point on just in terms of the reporting and whether in your experience the staff feel supported when they report something. What are the barriers to that? What can organisations do? And then perhaps also in terms of the well-being and the wider support element.
Absolutely. I think that from a reporting point of view, if you're building a trust relationship with your staff and building that you are going to be supported if there is a situation on board, you are going to be looked after, you are going to have access to support from external sources if you so need to, then I think that can start to grow. The word starts to travel then that it's okay to report these things, and actually it's a good thing to report these things because you're then going to get that further support, or more likely to get that further support. And I think also extending some of these support mechanisms that we have in the industry, such as peer support, such as mental health support, if you can extend those to other safety facing roles. I know from our organisation, we're seeing lots and lots of cabin crew now becoming supported by these structures, which I think is absolutely, especially with situations like disruptive passengers, is absolutely essential to make sure that those things are very quickly implementable. You can put them into place very, very quickly. If there is an incident in place, you have somebody that you can phone at the end of the phone and say, how do I deal with this situation? Who do I need to speak to? And you have people there who are qualified to deal with that. Also, the peer relation, I think, is really important, because there are, quite often people who have been through similar situations themselves within the industry who can then start to support people. And it stops that whole having to explain what's happened, how the industry works, what's gone on, because if you can talk to somebody who is an aviation person, then absolutely you have that right straight away to all of that conversation has already been had. You can start to talk about how you can, what sort of mechanisms you can put in place to get yourself where you need to be. We talk about, helpful coping mechanisms, and how the mechanisms that you use to cope with difficult situations can quite quickly help you to recover. So there's lots and lots of things you can do, and I think support structures are essential in making sure that people have that ability to get that help quite quickly, really, after something's happened.
And I think that in itself, you raise a really interesting point there that I think is useful for any organisation to bear in mind, is to promote reporting and the support available to staff, but then when it works, is to promote that to other staff. And I know word spreads, particularly when things work really, really well, but the more organisations can kind of share that within their organisations to give people trust in the system. Absolutely. I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Is building that trust in the system so that people feel that they can report, and as Daniela said, particularly for that to be part of an induction process as early in your time in the organisation as possible, almost.
And it needs to also, sorry, John, it needs to be continuously given to the staff. It needs to be that, I always say, you need to keep the drums drumming, because you need to constantly let them know that this help is still available, and remind them that this help is available, because it takes time for it to start to become part of your culture, part of what you do. So by continuously bringing that forward and saying this is available to you, this is available to you, then it does start to, that word will spread a lot more quickly then.
And actually there's sorry, somebody else wants to come in? Yes, Hans Christian, yes.
Sorry, John, just one problem, because for the airlines, that is very easy to solve this problem, because there's already regulation on there. But much more bigger problem is in aerodrome side, because we still have no any regulation on that. And so if you wanted to provide best practice, yes, you can solve this problem, but actually that's not mandatory. And that is a reason, like, sometimes we are struggling with these problems, how to solve internally, because if there's no regulation that you have to provide some kind of service or some kind of help for our employees, then that stays only just best practice in the industry. So.
And actually the regulation is only currently geared towards pilots as well. So that excludes cabin crew in a lot of situations, which is why I'm kind of advocating for cabin crew getting those supports as well. And all the safety facing roles, to be fair.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks for that. And Hans Christian, I saw you had your hand up there on that one. Do you want to come in now on that?
Can't hear you.
Christian, are you there? Can you hear us?
Christian, your sound.
Okay, well, if you can hear us, Hans Christian, you can come back in at some point, then feel free to jump in. I was going to follow up just by saying there was a comment from Chris Major from ETF, who also works with Daniela and others on this topic particularly. Chris is saying, following on from your comments, Claire, but I think the discussion is quite timely, given that what we were just talking about there is ICAO have produced Doc 10185 on critical incident response processes, which then particularly also, you were saying there's no regulation on it, but at least there's ICAO level guidance that supports, at least provides some information from an ICAO perspective on how you can support crew after passenger incidents. So that's particularly worth noting. And thanks, Chris, for adding that in. I'll find a way to add that link to our material as well, so that's good. I don't know if Hans Christian's managed to get back in or can hear us at the moment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. Yeah.
Some minor technical issues here. So I probably lost a little bit, but I just want to emphasize that promotion of the SMS system is extremely important and one of the pillars we have within our system. And secondly, I just want to say that, we are depending on report, and I think it's extremely important for our colleagues to understand that we will use the content of the report to educate further what has been reported. And, we will not have any punishment in that sense if that's a thought somebody have. So it's just to emphasize that we will use it for education, and I think this all lies within the just culture philosophy anyway, that we encourage reporting because that's what we will learn from. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that you raise, and yeah, it's something that I know, particularly when we've been building the material for the campaign in general, is encouraging reporting and kind of continually doing that, so staff feel they're happy to use that process, and that they're not scared of reporting. And I've seen lots of different organisations trying really clever ways. I saw one organisation using WhatsApp to support, if anybody had any questions about reporting, and there was another one where they were using a Facebook cabin crew Facebook group inside the company as well. So there's lots of different ways that help improve, help share the experience of reporting. So I'm going to move on to a few more questions. There's a question from my colleague Adam who asks, particularly to you, Hans Christian, have you conducted a root cause analysis of your incidents? And did you identify any specific patterns?
Basically, every report is being investigated by the safety office, and together with the safety office, I do sit down and look at reports if needed. Any patterns identify? I mean, just looking at the report slide I showed you, there's clear that alcohol and disobeying crew is two of the most reoccurring incidents. So I mean, alcohol is a problem for sure. Either if it has been consumed at home, at the airport, or on board the aircraft. So, and I mean, we all play an important part in that respect. I don't think there's any point of pointing any fingers at it, as it was mentioned earlier. The question is actually, what do we do about it? Both as an airport and as an airline, we are commercial operators, but this is for sure something we have to talk about and discuss. And that's also why, when we have meetings, the commercial department is an important stakeholder in that respect. So yeah, alcohol, unfortunately, seems to be the root cause too often.
And it's interesting because it's something that I know there was a meeting in Ireland as part of the work there, and even have you had to look at any particular measures to help kind of solve? Do you have a challenge? Is it something you've been able to do anything about? I know you've not had to go as far as there was one airline was talking about they actually banned sale of alcohol on a particular route, or there's no particular trends like that and they requiring you to perhaps go that far then?
No, and I think it will be difficult to ban it completely. I don't think that will either happen at the airport or on board. But I think the actual handling around it. Because I mean, you're not allowed to serve alcohol to people that are visibly intoxicated. So I think the amount of alcohol also being served. First of all, I think most people, they are enjoying a glass of wine or beer because they enjoy it, and luckily most of them behave nicely. But I think the ones that consume too much, and I think unfortunately we do also have, if you are brand new, if you are uncertain, I think this whole policy about how much we actually do serve as well, it's also an important first step. I used to work as a bartender before I joined the airline, and just serving 4 units of alcohol, that shouldn't be the case. You have to do it step by step, because I don't think, or many passengers don't understand the consequences it has to your body when you are in a different altitude. So I think educating our colleagues when it comes to the policy towards alcohol serving, because I don't think it will go away, that's equally important on the consequences it might have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is empowering staff and giving them guidance in terms of supporting them on alcohol consumption of passengers. I know that's something that was brought up in one of the other webinars, so that's a really good point to make. Thanks very much for that. I'll go to another question now. So maybe it's something maybe for Daniela or for Eva perhaps, maybe it's something that you've all faced, is Roberto says that they've had situations with ground handling staff often include in their report on unruly passenger events that they've had challenges with police services rather than call police for protection, but found the police not necessarily helping the situation and taking the side of a passenger or that kind of challenge. Is that something you've ever seen or faced or had anything to deal with? Maybe any of our panelists really.
If I may, this happened. Yes, this is one of the issues why some people don't want to report, because sometimes maybe it depends probably also on states, on culture. When the authority comes, the first thing they will ask you is your badge. And sometimes it looks like, yes, you were the problem. So this is one of the issues we fought against. We really fought, this is one of them. We wanted the tripartite because we wanted to have everybody on our side understanding that I don't want to call police just because I like to lose time. But if I do it, then there's an issue. And if I do it too much, maybe I need more training. Okay, but this is a second point. So this really does happen. And when you were talking about the Montreal Protocol, that is really something that needs to be ratified, because in some countries, even if it's ratified or not, there's the issue that if you have something on board and then you have to file the complaint against, it has to be your personal complaint. And as a crew, you have to go down, you know that you're descending the same airplane with someone that is unruly, and you should go to police and file a complaint, and then you go home. Are you sure you go home safely? So there are many aspects, and this is why ETF is not stopping to say this is something we have to do all together.
Yeah, I think it also highlights some of the discussion that we've been having with different national authorities about then the collaboration between the national authority and the police service to educate them, and then particularly I've seen some great examples in all sorts of different countries about this very kind of community team kind of policing approach. So that, as you said, one of the challenges is that if staff call the police force that are at the airport, they're all part of one team managing that risk through the airport, rather than it being seen as lots of different people working differently together. And it's interesting that follows perhaps there's some other questions. So there's a comment from Bart about one of the factors in unruly passengers in flight is behaviour not being stopped and recognised at the boarding gates, crew not equipped with the knowledge, and specifically asking, is the EASA working on regulating the training requirements for ground handling on that? There's no, certainly I'm not aware of any, it's not something that, in terms of any EASA requirements specifically for training of ground staff yet, but I know there's lots of discussion around that topic, and particularly as we get more SMS coming in, is then training as a mitigating factor where risks are identified in particular places, and training staff, that's something particularly that might happen, but it's an initial one, kind of starts to answer that challenge as well. In terms of how do we support the airport to identify problems? There was a great presentation I saw from Dublin Airport about how they try and identify problems as early in the process as possible, so it's less likely people get to the gate. And again, the more training is available and the more training people do, the better that gets. Daniela.
So, what can I add from my side? We have very good cooperation with our security staff and with our local police. But where is the problem? The police, they have no any tools to solve the situation later on, because, okay, they got a report, but afterwards, that's administrational pass, and they can just warn the passenger not to do that anymore. And the next one, why probably the staff afraid to make reports, officially ones, because afterwards the passengers, they are starting to stalk these employees in social medias, so in Facebook, in LinkedIn, and so on and so on. And so the staff sometimes feels unsupported in this field, because we cannot protect the profile in Facebook, or doesn't matter where. So that's the big issue, actually.
And actually, you raised something that it's worth mentioning again. Is a discussion we had on Monday, specifically where one of the airlines was talking about they only use have the staff member's first name on a badge and not their full name, and they even ask staff, particularly in kind of customer-facing roles, to think about what they have, how they have their pass, and that what's visible to the passenger is perhaps just their first name, which makes it harder for people to be traced in that situation. So it's certainly something for organizations.
I believe that's not so difficult to find out the person if you know the face. So that's very easy. That just take time, maybe 2 days, and you can find him in a Facebook, because we cannot say that the persons are not in a Facebook. Everyone is in Facebook or Twitter or all other channels. So.
And I think that's one of the challenges, is how we support our staff and stop things like that happening again. And of course, the thing we're always challenging is we're always facing the challenge of is how we there's lots of different competing requirements. So whether it's sharing information on unruly passengers, and the challenge then of how we come across the data protection rules. We talk particularly also, if we talk about IDs and badges, sorry, when I was talking about the names, so my colleague Adam was pointing out, obviously on the ID that people have like this, there's a requirement that has their full name. But then I know we were talking about the name badges that people have on their body, rather than the visible one in front of the passenger on their uniform, necessarily, rather than their name badge. Although there was one organisation on Monday that was talking about they kind of have a way that the badge itself is visible and has the right information, but they encourage staff to have that if they're then behind a counter, for example, that their ID is perhaps like mine is here tucked under, rather than perhaps on a clip with their full name then visible in front of the passenger. So that's the kind of thing we were talking about at that point. But certainly, as I say, coming back to Bart's question, there isn't anything specifically in terms of regulating this in training right now. But as there's more things on risk management, maybe that's something that becomes a requirement in the future, or perhaps it's something that's more a voluntary activity. We have to see how that develops. So I'll come back to that one in the future. Then in terms of just that last one there, yes, we'll share the slides that we've got, hopefully the presentation, but the recordings, they'll be edited down and put on our YouTube for people to watch afterwards. So we'll send everybody an email with all of the materials and everything after the event. It will probably be tomorrow or early next week, depending on how quickly we can get the things edited down. And then lastly, just in terms of, there's a question here from Natasha about training, and in terms of practical training of adopting training in terms of new issues. And I know certainly organisations we've talked about, and we talked a little bit about it there with Hans Christian and with others, about once you see the data and you understand more about what your challenges are, you can evolve the training for your staff based on what you learn from your data, and whether it's handling alcohol in the airport, or alcohol consumption in flight, or whether there's other problems. I know certainly we've had a lot of discussions in the past about smoking, so there's all sorts of things like that. So I'll finish the questions there, and maybe just to finish with our panelists now, just one quick question to all of them. If there's one thing, maybe 10-15 seconds, that you could do, if you had a magic wand to make this problem go away, and you could only do one thing, maybe Claire, I'll come to you first. What would you do?
I think for me, that proactive element, really, making sure that you are proactively ensuring that all of your crew, not just pilots, have that support, have things in place, are they know that there is support out there for them. They build that trust and they build that workplace culture that says, yeah, you're going to be looked after if anything does go wrong.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Claire. And Daniela next. What would be your one big thing that you would do?
Well, my one big thing would be to be able to ban passengers for a period. No, it's at least to understand what it's going on. But mostly, as Claire said, hers is better.
But at the same time,
Oh,
this
yours
is
is
one
valid.
of the things about sorry, Claire, one of the good things about this discussion is it's having that conversation about what's possible, and rather than just it's easy to say that's very difficult, but the more we can talk about this in an open way, I think that's great. Eva, maybe come to you next.
So I fully agree with Claire and Danielle. So the first of all, this proactivity and of course just improvement of knowledge for the passengers, how to start the smooth journey, because we are not talking about intoxication just in an aerodrome or in a flight time, but actually they are starting already the journey already intoxicated, so they are coming already here. So, and that is the thing I wanted to change.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Eva. And last to Hans Christian, what would be your one thing that you would do?
Yeah, first of all, I think we just have to, I mean, the challenges will still be with us, that's for sure. So I guess the question is really, what can we do about to minimize it? Yeah. I looked at the question before I went into the meeting as well, and I made note of two things, and that was alcohol, and the second was actually blacklisting, because I think it needs to have consequences. Yeah. One of the challenges I see is that many airports also sell the same products as we do on board, which also, I think one of my main challenges when I'm out flying is that they're also drinking, alcohol that you don't even see. So it's it all goes back to information, being key. I think also passengers need to be aware of what is expected from them. So I mean, it all binds together.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thanks for that. And a huge thanks to all of our panelists for their insights and their discussion, and also to you in terms of all the audience as well. Hopefully you found this a really interesting webinar, and thank you. And we're going to close things there, bang on our 1:30 time slot. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully your summer won't have too many unruly passengers in them, and hopefully this material will be useful for you. So thanks very much, everybody. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
John.
Bye.